In 2001, Sunday, August 5th, 2001, I was watching a Cleveland Indians baseball game. Some of you might remember this. Cleveland Indians, a long time ago, right? Cleveland Indians were facing one of the toughest teams in Major League Baseball history, the Seattle Mariners. Remember the Seattle Mariners in the early 2000s? They were really good. In fact, that season, in 2001, the Seattle Mariners would go on to tie for the most wins in a baseball season, 116 wins that season. Well, on this particular Sunday, the Seattle Mariners were visiting the Cleveland Indians, and so the Indians were at home, and no one thought they had a shot. They really didn't. After the third inning, 3 innings, it looked like all hope was lost for the Cleveland Indians. They were down already 12-0 after 3 innings. Typical Cleveland sports history. The Indians finally scored 2 runs in the 4th inning. But then the Mariners came back and scored 2 more, making the score 14-2 after 5 innings. 5 innings, trailing 14-2 after 5 innings. A lot of the fans begin to leave the stadium. Typical Cleveland sports fans. What are we going to stick around for this for, right? Well, then something happened. The Indians ended up holding the Mariners to 14 runs. And they came back and they scored 3 in the 7th, 4 in the 8th, and they tied the game with 5 runs in the 9th inning, sending the game into extra innings. I'll never forget this game I was watching. I was a big Cleveland Indians fan. And so in the 10th inning, no runs were scored. Finally, in the bottom of the 11th inning, the Indians got on base. Remember Kenny Lofton? Love that guy. Kenny Lofton got to second base. And Cabrera came up to bat, 1 out. I don't remember what the pitch count was, but Cabrera swung on a pitch, broken bat, single to left field. Kenny Lofton ran from second base to home and had to slide into home to score the winning run. Isn't that great? Like, you just want to jump up and like, yeah, go Tribe, right? We love comeback stories, don't we? We just love to hear when the underdog comes back and wins. We love those kinds of stories. Well, in 2001, the same year, Sports Illustrated magazine ran an article in their magazine entitled Bouncing Back Big Time. Bouncing Back Big Time. It listed the greatest 10 comeback stories of all of history. Number 10, I don't understand this one. Number 10 was Elvis Presley. Any Elvis fans in the house? Woohoo! Number 5 was Muhammad Ali. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Number 4, John Travolta. Number 3, Michael Jordan. Remember Michael Jordan? Yeah. Check out number 1. That's the real article from Sports Illustrated. Jesus Christ, 33 A.D., defies critics and stuns the Romans with his resurrection. That's from Sports Illustrated 2001. Isn't that awesome? Well, in John chapter 11, verse 25, after arriving in Bethany at the tomb of one of his dear friends, Jesus said this, top of your message notes there in your bulletins, I am the resurrection and the life. I am the resurrection and the life. Now, I want to ask you this morning, how can something that happened almost 2,000 years ago impact our lives today? How can an event that happened 2 millennia ago impact our lives today? I suggest to you this morning that because Jesus came back, because he came back, you can also come back. Because Jesus came back, you can also come back. And I want to look at all 4 Gospels pretty quickly this morning, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and kind of glean from them and discover 4 great comebacks that you're assured of because of Jesus' resurrection. Let's dive in. Now, you go through life, you don't have to look very far to realize that people today are struggling. I mean, I would imagine some of you came in this morning and just feel like your life is just really, really hard. You're struggling with life. You look at the faces all around you. You go to work, you walk down the street, you go to the grocery store, wherever you go, and you can just tell people are hopeless. They're discouraged. A lot of fear going on. And people, I think, you look at certain people and you go, man, they look lost and fed up with everyday living. People are wondering, how do I bounce back from losing my house? How do I bounce back from bankruptcy? How do I bounce back from losing my marriage? How do I bounce back from a death in the family? How do you bounce back from broken relationships, a broken economy, and a broken culture? How do you bounce back from this really tough stuff going on in our lives? And then you ask, who can you count on for help? Where do you turn? What can you count on for help? In America, for a long time, we thought we could count on the economy. Can we? And we thought we could count on employment. Can we? We thought we could count on the government. Maybe the government will come in and help us. Can we really do that? Who's going to help us? Barack Obama? I think he's helped a little bit, right? Hillary Clinton? Who's going to help us in the future? Hillary Clinton? Donald Trump? Does it look pretty promising to you? Yeah, I'm excited this year. I can't wait to vote in November. This is going to be awesome. Where do you turn? Where do you turn? Really, is there anything you can count on when you've discovered that you really can't count on anything? Where do you turn? Is there any foundation solid enough to hold my life together so that it can't be taken away, so that I can have some hope in this world? Where do I turn? Matthew, Gospel of Matthew, paints a picture of two deeply discouraged people. Let's read. Matthew chapter 27, verse 59. Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a clean cloth. Took Jesus' body, wrapped it in a clean cloth, and he placed it in his own new tomb that he had cut out of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to the tomb, and he went away. Now here are the two people. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting there opposite the tomb. They weren't there for joy and peace and comfort. These two Marys sit by kind of hopeless and helpless, kind of discouraged because the friend that they had followed around for a long time, the friend whom they had cooked for, the friend that they invited into their home, was now dead. You could imagine the discouragement these two ladies were going through. And then 2 days later, on Sunday morning, they're journeying again to the tomb, not to see Jesus risen from the dead, but to properly embalm his body. They'd given up. They were discouraged. The women get to the tomb, and what happens? Well, they see the stones rolled away. And there's this angel sitting on top of this big, large rock. And here's what happens in verse 5 of Matthew 28. The angel said to the women, "Don't be afraid. I know you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. He's not here. He has risen, just as he said." He has risen. Now, I want to tell you, these three words are the reason over 1 billion people gather together every Sunday morning to worship all around the world. 1 billion people gather together to worship because of these three words. These three words separate Jesus from every other religious leader known to humankind. Joseph Smith, Muhammad, even Moses. Remember Moses from the Old Testament? You know what all these guys have in common? You can go to their grave and guess what? They're still in there. But what separates Jesus from these good religious leaders is that Jesus, you go to his grave and what? It's empty. Why? 3 words. He has risen. He has risen. These 3 words give people of every generation hope. People don't gather together and say, "You know what? Dude, the stock market has risen." And we don't reply, "It has risen indeed." We don't do that, do we? We don't gather together and say, the employment rate has risen, or the gross domestic product has risen, or General Motors has risen. We don't greet each other and saying, "Dude, the value of my 401k has risen." And you don't reply, "It has risen indeed." We don't do that. That's crazy, right? But because Jesus has risen, people discover there is something they can count on. We can gather together and we can say, "You know what? Christ has risen." Thank you. I was waiting for that. Christ has risen. He is risen indeed. Yeah. And because of that, we have hope. We have hope. The resurrection of Jesus Christ fuels hope in our lives. Because of the resurrection, write this in your notes, I can come back from despair. I know life is rough. I know you've gone through some really rough stuff in life. But because Jesus has risen from the dead, he can help you get over that stuff and really move on and give you some hope. That's what the women discover in Matthew early in the morning on Easter Sunday. Jesus lifts them from despair and disappointment, and he gives them hope of a better tomorrow. He does that for you, and he does it for me. All right, so these two women. Let's move on to another guy, a guy named Peter. Peter, I think, finds himself beyond despair. He's a little deeper here in what has happened. Before Jesus' death, remember Peter kind of stands up to Jesus and he tells him, Lord, I've got your back. Even if I have to die with you, we'll go all the way, man. I'll protect you. I'll make sure nothing bad happens to you. Peter's got his back, and you can count on me, he says. But when the going got tough, what happened? Peter bailed on Jesus. He bailed on his best friend. Just when Jesus needed him the most, Peter, he beats feet. He's out of there. He denies even knowing who Jesus was, and some little girl in the courtyard scares him off. And Peter goes out and he runs and he hides just when Jesus needs him the most. Now, I put myself in Peter's shoes and I think, had I heard that Jesus had risen from the dead, and I'm Peter, am I thinking, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? I just denied him a couple days ago, and now he's alive. I don't even know if I want to face him. Is he going to accept who I am, or is he going to lay into me and just kind of write me off? I think some of us feel that way sometimes, if Jesus is alive and I show up at church, are they going to forgive me, or are they going to write me off? Are they going to condemn me? Am I going to show up in church and feel accepted, or will these people reject me because of what I've done? Do I have a future, or is God writing me off? I imagine that's how Peter felt. Jesus is done with him. Peter denied even knowing who he was. And then I think Gospel of Mark gives us two very encouraging words. The angel tells the women in Mark 16:7, he says, but go tell his disciples and Peter. He's going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. And Peter. Isn't that interesting? And Peter. Jesus, what I get from this, Jesus still loves Peter. Jesus still wants to have a relationship with Peter, the man that denied even knowing who he was. Peter still matters to Jesus, and Peter has a future because of Jesus. Watch this clip from the movie Risen.
Peter, let's walk a little farther.
Why?
To be closer. Simon, do you love me?
Yes. You know that I do.
Do you love me?
Yes.
Simon, do you love me?
With all my heart.
And you must feed my lambs.
We love comeback stories, and here's Peter, after denying Jesus and even knowing who he was, Jesus still gives Peter purpose. He takes him in his arms. He says, you know what, Peter, don't worry about the past. I still have a plan for you. I have purpose for you, and I want you to fulfill that. Feed my lambs. I think what we find in Mark is that Jesus' resurrection means that your past, no matter what you've done, no matter how bad it is, no matter how big you think you messed up, your past is not unforgivable. Jesus forgives you no matter what. You cannot walk so far away from God that he cannot reach out to you. He forgives, no matter how bad you think it is. So what this means then, write this in your notes. Jesus' resurrection means that I can come back from defeat. Man, how often do you feel defeated? Like, I messed up big time. The world is against me. I don't know how I'm going to make it. because of Jesus' resurrection, he shows up into your life not to condemn you, but to wrap his arm around you and say, it's okay, man. It's okay, buddy. It's okay, sister. It's okay. You got this, and I can help you rise above it, and I can give you meaning and purpose in life. That's what Jesus does because of his resurrection. Let's move from Peter. Let's go to Thomas. You know Thomas. There's an article today in the Lookout magazine. Did you see it? We call Thomas what? Doubting Thomas. Doubting Thomas. I shared last Sunday, I wish sometimes I could have been Thomas, that I could have felt the wounds in Jesus' side and seen the nail prints in his hands and feet. I wish I could have been Thomas. Why? So that I can maybe have no doubt and just really believe that this is for real. And I think some of us are wired to be skeptical. We got any skeptics out there? Come on, be honest. I think the older I get, the more skeptical I become. I'm not naive like I used to be, and I just kind of question everything. It's just how God wires us sometimes. Like, just give me proof. I need to know beyond a shadow of a doubt this is for real, And I think you might be surprised that sitting among us this morning, there's no doubt that there are people who were probably at one time atheists, like I'm against God, don't want to have anything to do with it, or agnostic, like I don't know enough, I need to know more. There are people among us who may have been other religions at one time, and now they're sitting among us today going, I'm no longer skeptical. It's for real. I have no doubt that even this morning we have people sitting among us that still need more proof that God and Jesus are for real. No doubt. Again, I want to share with you Acts chapter 1, verse 3. I've shared this almost, I think, every week in this message series. Acts chapter 1, verse 3. One more time, Luke writes this. He says, after Jesus' suffering, he showed himself to these men and gave what? 3 words, many convincing proofs that he was still alive. Isn't that? Many convincing proofs. Now, I want to draw something out of this that I haven't done yet. These 3 words come from one Greek word, which literally means legally admissible evidence. Legally admissible evidence. Here's Jesus. Even his message is, never believe anything without solid evidence. And that's where Thomas stands right after the resurrection. He hadn't seen Jesus yet. Just show me proof. Show me proof that he's still living. Show me substantial proof. Give me evidence that would hold up and stand up in court. Many convincing proofs, and then I'll believe. And then what happened? Thomas got to talk with Jesus. He got to walk with him. He got to touch his wounds. He got the convincing proof. And then take a look at Luke 24. I kind of threw a couple verses up there, but Luke 24, 36 through 44. While they were still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, peace be with you. They were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. Verse 38. Jesus said to them, why are you troubled? Why do doubts rise in your minds? Look at my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones as you see I have. He had said this, he showed him his hands and feet. While they still did not believe it because of joy and amazement, he asked them, do you have anything here to eat? So they gave him a piece of broiled fish. He took it and ate it in their presence. Then, verse 44, he said to them, this is what I told you while I was still with you. Everything must be fulfilled that is written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms. Everything must be fulfilled. Everything that was written in the prophets and Moses and the Psalms, Jesus fulfilled. We talked about that last week. Who's standing in the room in that moment? Doubting Thomas. Thomas is standing in the room and he sees Jesus and he says, man, now I believe. I believe. Now, Jesus goes on and says, blessed are those who have not seen me yet still believe. And because of Jesus' resurrection, write this third D in your notes, Thomas and you and I, we can come back from doubt. We can come back from doubt. I'll be honest, I get a little skeptical sometimes. Just give me some more proof. I've shared with you the story about the little boy in Qumran. Remember this? 1947, this boy throws a rock into a cave and he hears pottery crash and they pull out all these scrolls known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. Well, scientists go to work on these Dead Sea Scrolls and they find out that that these scrolls had been written long before Jesus was born. Long before Jesus was born, these scrolls were put together. And then they find that every book of the Old Testament is within these scrolls, except with the exception of Esther. So 37 of the books of the Old Testament are found in these old scrolls. And now the scientists want to find something. Isaiah 53. Isaiah 53 describes Jesus' crucifixion. And scientists think that if Isaiah 53 isn't in there, they think it's been all a scam all along for all these years, that authors put Isaiah 53 into our modern day Bibles in order to say Jesus, was crucified. So they want to disprove it. So they're either going to find that Isaiah 53 describes the crucifixion, or they're going to find that it's not there and that man put it there as a scam because they thought it had been added later. Well, they unroll the great scroll of Isaiah. What do they discover? Isaiah 53, just as it's described in our modern day Bibles, the whole crucifixion of Jesus Christ, just as modern Bibles described it. And I think it's interesting that the more archaeologists and more scientists go out there and try to disprove what happened in the Bible, the more they try to disprove that God and Jesus, are real, the more they try to disprove it, guess what? The more evidence we get that it's actually all true. It's all real. It's amazing. It's amazing. Because of the resurrection, you can come back from doubt. You can stand on a solid faith. And I can say with Jesus, stop doubting and believe. Stop doubting and believe. Just muster up some faith. I'll give you the last comeback, and it real quick. Because of Jesus' resurrection, I can come back from death. I can come back from death. There's an old joke. It goes like this. You've probably heard this before, so laugh, humor me a little bit. Three guys are talking about what they once said at their funerals. What do you want people to say about you at your funeral? So these guys are talking. The first guy says, well, you know what? I want them to say he was a great guy. I like that. I hope people say I'm a great guy. Second guy said, well, I want them to say he was a wonderful husband and a great dad. Hope they say that about me too. Third guy thought for a moment, and he said, hey, I want them to say, hey, look, he's moving. This is the part where you laugh. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Let me ask this. Have you really thought about death? I don't know if in America, we think about dying and death. When it happens, we kind of start thinking about, how am I going to die? When's it going to happen? But have you really thought about death? Look at your neighbor. Go ahead. Take a look at them. Look at the people behind you now. Look at those guys. Look at the people in front of you. Do you know what you all have in common? In 100 years, all of us in this room, we're going to be dead. Welcome to First Church, where we preach relevant and inspiring messages. Have you really thought about it? Someday I'm going to be dead. No longer be on this earth. Isn't that crazy? Who goes through life without knowing, who goes through life knowing that something is going to happen, but doesn't prepare for it? You're going to graduate high school, so you prepare for it, right? You get ready. Get good grades, maybe I'm going to go to college, maybe I'm going to get a job. You prepare for that. You're going to get your driver's license, so you practice driving. You're going to wake up tomorrow morning and you have to get ready. So, you get your clothes ready and you take showers, and you prepare yourself. We go through all of life preparing for things. Man, I even set my DVR to prepare myself to watch my favorite shows. We spend our lives preparing, but do we really prepare for our death? We know that someday, somehow, we're going to die. Are we preparing for it? Well, we get our wills together and we kind of plan out, what we want for our funeral. But are you preparing for what happens 30 seconds after you die? Are we preparing for that? Because Jesus says we're going to live forever. That's a long time. We're going to live forever. Are you preparing for it? Jesus said in John chapter 11, I am the resurrection and the life. That's at the top of your message notes. Then he says, he who believes in me will live even though he dies. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. So if you're connected to Jesus, you will rise because he rose. Are you preparing for it? I love the Gospel of John. In chapter 20, John closes out with these words. He says this, Jesus did many other miraculous signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. I'd love to know what that stuff is, Then he says, but these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that, let's say this together, by believing you may have life in his name. Now, I know there are a lot of people out there saying, if you're just a good person, if you do good things in life, you'll be all right. You get that from this verse? They think that, it doesn't matter if you go to church, or even if you believe in God. If you're a good person, you'll be okay. You get that from this verse? You see, the only way that you can be deemed good does not get you into heaven. There's only one person that can make you good. The only way you can be deemed good is through the blood of Jesus Christ and your believing in him. All the other stuff is kind of fluff, right? That's the only way, and that's biblical. In Romans, that's what we read. There's no one righteous, not even one. How do we get righteous? Righteousness comes from God through his Son, Jesus Christ, and his blood. I can be a good person all I want. Good does not get me into heaven. The only way I can be good is through the blood of Jesus Christ. You're believing in him. Are you preparing for death? Actually, I should ask, are you preparing for life after death? What are you dreaming about? What are you expecting? What are you hoping for? That's the question. All right, so we've talked about 4 Ds: despair, defeat, doubt, and death. Does it sound like a little bit like the United States of America today? We are so down and out these days. It's depressing. And you might find yourself in one or more of these categories. Like, you just can't stand it anymore. You feel like life has dealt you a really bad hand. But I want to tell you this morning, I'm hoping to encourage you with these words this morning. Because of the resurrection, you can come back from despair. He can give you the hope you need to get through everyday living. You can come back from a life of defeat and experience forgiveness and grace. You can come back from doubt, and you can have confidence in your faith in Jesus Christ and in God. And you can come back from death. Isn't it awesome? Like, man, when you die, that's not it. There's something more, and it's greater and better. Knowing that your future is secure in Jesus Christ. That's what it's all about. That's what I hope you'll leave encouraged with today. Let's pray.